Hey there, welcome to Little Fixes, a podcast for the sassy, classy, and a little choosy भारतीय नारी. This is Macri. मैं और मेरे गेस्ट शेयर करते हैं सिंपल प्रैक्टिकल आइडियाज जो आप इजीली फॉलो कर सकते हैं to get closer to the kind of life you want to live. We talk about career, self-care, social media tips, parenting, relationships, and so much more to help you thrive. All of this is mixed with a lot of laughter. So, my lovely friend, continue what you're doing and join me in this real talk. Hello, sassy lady. Thank you for joining me today. I have a never ending to do list. I loosely plan my week on Sunday and like to properly plan the next day at least a day in advance. Most of the time मैं अपना हर दिन का काम फिनिश कर भी लेती हूँ बट नॉट विदाउट फीलिंग ओवरवेल्म्ड. और कभी कभी सब कुछ नहीं हो पाता और नेक्स्ट डे में ऐड हो जाता है, एडिंग टू द स्ट्रेस. Managing work from home as a social media marketer while coordinating with my team is a lot in itself. और उसके ऊपर से मेरी 4 साल की बच्ची मेरे साथ रहती है जिसका सब काम मुझे करना होता है और उसे एंटरटेन भी करना होता है. मेरे हस्बैंड का फुल टाइम जॉब है तो उनसे भी ज्यादा एक्सपेक्ट नहीं कर सकती. घर पे पार्ट टाइम हेल्पर्स हैं बट घर देखना तो होता ही है. और भी कितनी चीजें होती हैं करने को और थोड़ा मी टाइम भी चाहिए. Saying all this loud is already making me anxious. ये सब अच्छे से मैनेज करने के लिए प्रोडक्टिव होना बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. Yes, we all have off days, but 80% टाइम तो करना होगा ना. तो आपकी और अपनी लाइफ को थोड़ा सा ऑर्गेनाइज करने के लिए मैंने आज इनवाइट किया है कंटेंट स्ट्रैटेजिस्ट एंड प्रोडक्टिविटी कोच शैलजा वी को. If you don't already know her, then let me tell you that with her website, Intentional and Creative Affluence, she aims to simplify the art of content creation and infuse joy into the process. So, yes, she is the perfect person to guide us on the path of a more productive lifestyle. Let's welcome her. Hello, Shalja ma'am. I'm thrilled to have you on Little Fixes.
Thank you so much, Maitri. It's my honor to be here.
I'm grateful to you for being here. You have been a blogger and then you moved towards coaching. You also have ebooks and courses on social media and blogging. You also have a family. You talk a lot about being intentional, and I love your productivity tips. Were you always this organized and had this kind of clarity?
I have been organized, yes, but clarity is something that I believe I've developed over time. Our experiences shape us a great deal. So while I would say I was organized, I wouldn't say it was necessarily done with the intention of being kind to myself. It was more of, I needed to check things off my to-do list, like you mentioned in your introduction. So only when I started understanding that I don't have to finish everything on my to-do list, and I only need to keep on my list what is both practicable and enjoyable, that I started really embracing the concept of productivity. And I believe that every one of us has this potential and has this capacity, no matter what we do, no matter how many people we have in our household, whether we're living alone or whether we're living with a family, we can find this beautiful intentionality with our day to day. And that's what I try to teach both through my content and my courses and my ebooks, as you've already mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Yes, how beautiful. So, ma'am, what does productivity mean to you?
In my opinion, productivity is when you can end your day, go to bed feeling that you have done as much as you intentionally wanted to do without feeling a sense of lack, without feeling that you didn't do enough. Because the whole idea of time management, as far as I'm concerned, is the understanding that you should not feel stressed. You should not feel like you're juggling too many things. And most of us, especially women, I believe, fall into this trap of imagining that we should be this. So, we have a lot of expectations that primarily we place on ourselves, of course, but also a lot of expectations I believe society has placed on us as women. So there is this image of, a woman, especially a working woman, needs to be a superwoman. She needs to be, perfect in the kitchen, perfect in the home, perfect parent, perfect wife, perfect mother, perfect daughter-in-law, and also a perfect businesswoman. So how is that practically going to be possible? It is not. Which is why one of the things I talk about when I talk about productivity is the concept of harmony. And it is instead of the concept of balance. Because balance seems to say that I should have a very clear handle and a very clear 50-50 distribution of my energy towards work and home. But practically speaking, that is not going to be possible on a day-to-day basis. There will be days when you don't want to think about work, and there'll be days when you don't want to think about the home, and that should be okay. So, and that I believe is an evolution. And while I do try to teach people about this, I also understand that each person comes to this awareness when they are ready.
Hmm.
And that's what I try to help them understand. Are you ready for this awareness to enter your life? Because the more time we spend chasing this apparent productivity, which is somewhere in the distant future, we forget about the beauty of the time that we already have right here in front of us.
Hmm.
So I tell people, don't worry about tomorrow, don't worry about the day after that, or next week, or next month, because you have no idea whether that's going to even be practical or visible or possible. What do you have today, right here, right now? Not even in the next hour, right here, when you are sitting here looking at the work that you are doing. What is the absolute joy that you are getting out of doing this particular task? Whether that's creating a piece of content, or whether that's cooking a meal for your family, or whether that's just chilling and watching something which you enjoy on TV, or reading a book, or going for a walk. How do you learn to embrace the happiness that comes from each single activity? That is productivity as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. I think most of us want to, be in a state like that, but at least for me, it is very easy to feel overwhelmed. जो mindful होने वाली बात होती है वो नहीं आ पाती. Like अगर I have to, like I'm like कि चलो अभी lunch कर रहे हैं, let's watch TV also. But I'm doing two tasks, and I'm also thinking about that. I have to put my daughter to nap immediately after this. Then I have to sit down to work at 3 again. मतलब in the moment, living in it, enjoying it is very, very difficult. And you are saying that going to bed with a clear mind, with a joyful mind, it seems really difficult, this concept of harmony. So I think it messes up our mental health also to some level.
So I want to go back to what you said. You talked about feeling overwhelmed, right? You
Hmm.
talk about feeling overwhelmed and you talk about thinking about five different things when you're sitting down to eat a meal. And while I don't say there's anything wrong with mindful eating or mindful food, and I advocate this myself, and that's why I say deeply lose yourself in the task and things like that. I still believe that each of us have to understand what will work for us given our circumstances. Now, you have a young child, you have a 4-year old, I have a 15-year old. So, obviously, right there, our circumstances are very different.
Hmm.
So, when you have a very young child at home, the level of dependency that that child will have upon your needs, your attention is much higher than, say, a 15-year-old. In fact, a 15-year-old doesn't want your attention. They say, leave me alone, so is right now. So, how do we tell ourselves not to feel overwhelmed? So,
Hmm.
in my experience, what I have learned to do is I have what I call my 3 MIT rule every single day.
Hmm.
Now, my MIT rule is very simple. I call it the most important task rule. It's a concept that I learned from this great writer called Leo Babauta. He's the blogger and author behind ZenHabits.net. And one of the things that I've learned is if I tell myself that I need to be this perfect mom, perfect cook, a perfect businesswoman all in the same day, it's not going to be possible. However, if I tell myself that I'm going to do three important tasks today, just three important tasks, maybe one in each aspect of my life, and
Hmm.
then end the day saying, I'm done with these three tasks, that's all that matters. So, as an example, one of the things I tell myself is my one important task on a particular day could be, especially related to my business, could be conducting a client conversation. So, a coaching call with a client. So, that could be my business task of the day. Now, the advantage there is it's on my calendar. So, I know that if I have a client session at 11 a.m. or 11:30 a.m., I will ensure that I am done with all of my work before that. So, the mind itself goes into what I call the optimization concept, even without you really thinking too hard about it. Okay. Then the second thing I tell myself is next, what is important to me? Of course, yes, the client is important, but that is the business side of things. Then the next thing would be is to cook a hearty meal for my family. Now, one of the things I learned, especially in the last year and a half, thanks to the pandemic and the lockdown, and we all started cooking more at home and cooking pretty much exclusively at home, no ordering in and things like that. And I mentioned this very recently as well to somebody else or in my newsletter is that now there are two ways I can look at any task. I can look at it as, oh my God, why do I have to do this task? Why do I have to cook every single meal? Why do I have to?
Yeah.
Or I can tell myself, what a joy it is to be able to cook a meal and watch how all those ingredients come together and make something incredible. So when I approach that task with that mindset, the task itself becomes enjoyable. And of course, there is the end product at the end of it. Even if it is not the perfect meal or the perfect recipe, just the process of enjoying that itself finds its way into the end product. That's the first. That's the second thing. So I could say the second important task of the day is to cook a hearty meal for the family. If I'm too tired, I will tell myself, you know what, I'm not going to cook 3 meals today. I'm going to cook 2 meals, and I'll cook enough for the second meal so that that is enough. There's enough left over for the third meal of the day. So that would be the second task that I work on.
Hmm.
And third task, and this I feel is very important, and not enough people talk about this, is some form of self-care. And that self-care could be something as simple as, listening to music quietly on your own, going for a walk, reading a few pages of a book. Because I feel this is very important. The problem with so many women, especially, is because we never put ourselves first, which is why one of the first things I teach my clients when I talk about productivity coaching, when I do my productivity sessions with them, the first thing I ask them is, how much time are you giving yourself every single day? Because almost always the clients who come to me say, I have to think about my daughter, I have to think about my son, my in-laws, my parents, I have to think about keeping things ready for the cook or the maid, and only then I can sit down. So I tell them, if you start with yourself, that means you fill your own cup first. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to start with reading a book in the morning, but somewhere during the day, it should be on your calendar. It should be that time which is exclusively for yourself. Because when you are happy and when you make time for yourself, you are naturally inclined to help other people more. So,
Hmm.
so if you have a young child, for instance, and you say, okay, I don't get enough sleep at night. So, number one, your priority should be nothing else. Your priority should be sleep. Your priority should be getting enough sleep, because if you are not well rested, you cannot be productive. Which is why if a parent of a mom of a very young child signs up for a session with me, the first thing I ask them is, how much sleep are you getting? Because when you don't have enough sleep, you are frustrated, you are annoyed, you are irritated. You will in no way be capable of any sense of mindfulness if your body does not get that requisite amount of sleep.
Hmm.
So I tell them, forget about productivity. Productivity should not be your goal. Your first goal should be rest. Your first goal should be rest. And if that means you're only able to get 4 hours of sleep a night, thanks to the fact that your baby is teething or you're nursing and things like that through the night, focus on getting enough sleep, make it up during the rest of the day. Forget about hitting all your targets. That's not important right now. Focus on yourself first. Get into a rhythm. And once your child comes to a stage where they have a rhythm and your rhythm can match that rhythm, then you can start thinking about other things to add on. And see, this is the problem, right? Or this is the challenge that a lot of modern women face. We are constantly presented an image of this perfect woman balancing everything all the time.
Hmm.
So I say, oh, she's a mother of a very young baby, but look, she's always on Instagram, she's posting content, she's doing brand collaborations, she's doing promotions, and I feel useless. I can't do anything. So you have no way of knowing what is going on in her life, how many people she has behind the scenes helping her, how many people are staying up through the night making sure the baby sleeps while she's getting her beauty sleep. So you have no way of knowing any of those things because not enough people talk about that.
Yeah.
So I think it's important, and this is extremely important when it comes to productivity, is to first ask yourself if you are taking enough care of yourself. Because if you answer that, then everything else becomes slightly easier to acknowledge.
Hmm. Okay. So it also means that when we are following all these three steps, we will be more productive. And what does it mean in if we say in one line, जैसे आपने बोला कि हम सोने जाते हैं तो we feel relaxed. और क्या हो सकता है? Like how exactly do we define the results that come from being productive?
So here's the thing, right? So one of the things I always tell anybody who reaches out to me, whether it's content coaching or social media strategy or productivity, my focus is never on the results. I never focus on the results because results are completely out of your control. Completely
Mm.
out of your control. See, you can make plans, but how the plans will unfold, you have no control over. You
Mm-hmm.
have the illusion of control. That is why you're creating plans. You think,
Mm.
Acha, today I will do A, B, C, D, E. But then let's say you get up the next morning and you've not slept at all the previous night. All those, you have to goli maro all those 5 plans because your first and only rule for yourself on that day would be, am I getting enough sleep? I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to just make up sleep the rest of today. So my focus is always don't worry so much about the results. Don't worry about how productive am I at the end of the day. The more important question to ask yourself is, how content am I at the end of the day? Because that would be the only absolute that you can actually control in terms of how you feel. So how do you feel at the end of the day? So one of the things I recommend for my clients is, if at the end of the day they can write a short note in their journal or their diary saying, today I did ABC. So write something called a done list. Don't write a
Mm.
to-do list. Write
Mm.
a done list. I did this, I did A, I did B. So your done list could be something as simple as, I got 8 hours of sleep last night. Number
Mm.
one. Number two, I took my daughter to the park this evening. Number three, I cooked a 3-course meal this afternoon, I think after a week. And then
Mm.
when you see that, you start understanding that our achievements and our outcomes are not driven so much by what society expects of us. It's not even what we expect of ourselves. It is more what our soul is comfortable doing. And that is important. Which is why when you chart out your day or your week or your month, you have to be very sensible in plotting your days. You shouldn't pack too many things in. And you should always work in breaks. So, for instance, right now, this last week, I've taken a break. I usually take a break every 12 weeks from my business. Every 11th week, I take the 12th week off. In that week, I don't do anything work related. I usually go and tinker around a little with my email. Maybe I, do a couple of free calls with some people who are interested. But that's about it. I don't worry about my business. I don't worry about people are signing up for sessions. I don't worry about how many sales of ebooks and courses I've made. I completely focus on stepping back, because if you don't, it's very easy to fall into the trap of saying, oh, I'm not doing this. What could happen? What is
Mm.
all the negatives that will happen if I don't stay connected, if I'm not constantly posting on social media, if I'm not constantly updating my website, not constantly updating my podcast? So what happens? That will spiral into a sense of negative self-worth. You
Mm.
again start putting yourself into a sense of blame. So you should consciously work in breaks into your system, and consciously work in tasks into your regular schedule, such that there is a sense of harmony, so you don't feel overwhelmed. Your
Mm.
calendar is your best friend, as I tell people. Put everything on your calendar. See, the other problem as far as productivity is concerned, and this I've noticed with a lot of people, they expect their brains to remember everything and hold everything. And that's impossible. So, what I try to do is, wherever it's a question of reminders, I put it on my calendar. So, for instance, if I have a podcast guest session with you, it's on my calendar. If I have a session scheduled with my daughter's school, it's on my calendar. Everything is on my calendar, which means it leaves my brain free to do other things. I can think about topics to write about, I can
Mm.
read, I can relax, I can take time off. So my brain is actually spent on the creative side of things. It is not focusing on all these reminders and appointments and what all have you done today. My end of day review will tell me, did I have a good day? Do I feel happy about I don't want to use the word done or accomplished, but what I have managed to finish today
Mm.
without the overwhelm again. So every day, it's like a small positive affirmation. I want people to remind themselves that, did you have a good day today? Yes, I had a good day today. And that's all that matters. Are you going to bed happy? Are you going to bed rested? Are you going to bed without feeling, oh my God, I have so much to do tomorrow? Because in any case, that's tomorrow. You're not going to be able to fix it tonight.
Mm.
So forget about tomorrow and just focus on today. Focus on this moment, going to sleep happy, going to sleep rested, because that itself will help you wake up with a much better mindset.
Mm.
Isn't it?
Yeah, actually, what happens for me, like you mentioned that you write down or put everything in your calendar. I do the same, but still, I keep that running that list in my head. कि कल मेरे पास ये टास्क है, परसों रिकॉर्डिंग है, मंडे को इस क्लाइंट का काम है, ट्यूसडे को इस क्लाइंट का काम है, इवन दो इट इज रिटन इन माय कैलेंडर, still I
Right.
keep running it. So how do you not feel anxious?
Okay. So this particular challenge I find is something that you can tackle with the principle of observation. So if I try to tell you, every time you feel anxious, stop feeling anxious, it's not going to work. You'll feel
Mm.
more anxious, right? It's like you're trying to resist something with a lot of difficulty. Every time, rather, I tell people, every time you feel that sense of anxiety or that overwhelm hitting you, just observe it. Just observe it. And almost like somebody writing a clinical analysis, like a doctor writing a prescription, just tell yourself, you're feeling anxious right now. Don't judge it. You're not judging it. Just like a doctor saying this, oh, I notice you're feeling anxious right now. You're feeling stressed about your appointments for next week. Just observe and voice it out. Just observe and voice it out. Over time, it will not happen. It's not like a magical pill. It will not change by tomorrow or anything like that. Over time, this is a very interesting thing that will happen. The more you observe this happening, the more your awareness of it increases. And the more your brain starts to tell you, oh my God, you're doing this a lot, aren't you? Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing your brain tells you is, what are you achieving by stressing yourself? Because your worry or your anxiety is not actually going to solve the situation. It's not going to solve it. So over time, what I've consciously practiced and what I teach my students to do as well is to just observe that emotion, verbalize the emotion. You can either write it down or you can actually say it out loud to the mirror. You're feeling anxious about your complete list of appointments this week. You're feeling anxious. Don't judge it. Don't say don't feel anxious, because the minute you say, it's reverse psychology, right? The minute you tell a child don't do something, they'll immediately run towards it and pick it up or do something with it. So just tell yourself you're feeling anxious. You're feeling anxious. It's okay. You're feeling anxious. And then the more you give voice to that feeling, the more your mind understands. Over time, it will ask you, is this something to feel anxious about? Do you need to feel anxious about this? No judgment again. If it is something to feel anxious about, your mind will not even be paying attention to you. It will start overriding it in any case. But over time, you'll start understanding it's not within my control. I can feel anxious. I can worry myself sick. Okay. But it's not going to change the outcome. It's not going to change the fact that I have an appointment 3 days from now. It's still on the calendar, whether I worry about it now or whether I worry about it 3 days from now, whether I worry about it 2 days after the event is done. It's still going to be there. That event itself is not going to change. So I believe observation is a very crucial part of both productivity and habit building. So it's as simple as this, right? So for instance, if you feel anxious about the fact that we spend so much time on our phones, anxiety is one way of dealing with it, but it's not actually going to stop you from picking up your phone. But if you just observe it. So this is an exercise I've taught my students. I tell them, don't judge the fact that you're picking up your phone. At the end of every day, let us say you're very addicted to your phone. At the end of every day, just write down, I spent X number of hours on my phone today. I spent 7 hours on my phone today. That's all. Only that one line. You don't have to write anything else. I spent 7 hours on my phone today. Next day, end of the day, I spent 6 hours, 35 minutes on my phone today. Day 3, I spent 9 hours on my phone today. So it's not like a tapering thing. You will notice that it has, crest, because some days you may be, you may be going for your vaccine appointment or something like that, which means you'll have to be on your phone. You'll have to be tracking maps and checking where the location is. So you can very easily stress yourself. Oh my God, I spent this much time on my phone today. But if you just observe it, and don't judge it, just observe it. Over time, what will happen is your brain starts understanding, which is basically the principle of repetition. Right? Repetition and observation, your brain starts understanding, okay, you're spending a lot of time on your phone. And then once that awareness is there, it will ask you, instead of spending time on your phone, what can you do? You could read a book. You could put it down and listen to some music. You turn on the phone, turn on the car radio if you're in the car. Or you could just go for a walk. If you're sitting at home and instead of scrolling through your phone, if it is a nice, beautiful day outside, you could go for a walk. You don't have to beat yourself up if you don't do any of these things, but the awareness is there. And that is the challenge, right? For a lot of people, knowing that they're struggling with something, but they want instant solutions. The habit wasn't formed instantly. It formed over a period of time. So breaking the habit or changing the habit is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take its time. Even today, I will not say that I'm perfect with the amount of time I spend on my phone, or perfectly I'm spending only 5 hours on my laptop. It's not like that. There are days when sometimes I work a little overtime because I have a deadline to meet, but I don't blame myself for it. I don't blame myself. I don't penalize myself. I don't guilt myself, because if I do any of those things, the focus is now on the guilt, not on the actual task. What I mean? Yeah.
No, it makes so much sense when you say it like that. It's really, really difficult. But yeah, the thing
it is. And that is why, and that's why it's not a magic band-aid solution. It's not like, it's not like I can tell you do this and tomorrow you'll be as productive as the next person. It's not going to happen that way. It doesn't happen that way. However, if I give you the tools to understand where you are, in your situation and how you can adapt the situation to be more conducive to your circumstances, slowly that overwhelm will dissipate. Slowly, for instance, one of the things I'll give you in my own circumstance. I'm a social media strategist, right? I'm a social media coach as well. And up to about 8 months ago or 6 months ago, I was on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Hmm.
The beginning of the year, we are recording this sometime in August. So in around Jan of this year, 2021, is when I realized I was spending a lot of time on Twitter, but I was not really seeing any returns from it. And that was kind of stressing me out. Because interestingly, Twitter was one of my most popular channels. I had a lot of followers on the platform. But over time, what I realized was I had changed in my approach to the platform, which is why the platform stopped serving my needs specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So I removed Twitter from the equation. I deleted my Twitter account end of March this year.
Mm-hmm.
So that reduced my overwhelm a little bit. So instead of 4 platforms, now I was in 3 platforms.
Hmm.
And then midway through May, somebody asked me this question. Do I really need to be on social media if I want to market my business, grow my business? Is it possible to do all of this without social media? Now, I usually can't give answers to questions that I don't know the answers to. So I told them, you know what? I don't know the answer, but if you give me a couple of months, I'll come back and tell you. So let me take a social media sabbatical.
Hmm.
3 months, 2 months off from all my social media at the time, all
Yeah.
my social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I focused exclusively on creating content for my website, my podcast. I launched my podcast around that time, my YouTube channel, and of course, my newsletter. So I
Hmm.
focused on these 4 channels. And I learned a lot of things about my approach and my relationship with social media through that sabbatical. When I came back from the sabbatical, it was very clear Facebook was no longer serving my needs. So I've decided to let go of Facebook.
Hmm.
So now, when I look at social media, I have a very clear understanding that I only use 2 channels. One is Instagram, which is where my clients find me, my audience finds me, they engage in my content. And LinkedIn, which is a professional network where I connect with other business owners, other people whose thought processes are similar to what I talk about. Now, when I look at social media, it is from a much better space of awareness and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
But that again did not happen overnight, right? It didn't
Hmm.
happen magically. It
Mm-hmm.
happened with time. So that sense of awareness and that sense of understanding what serves you, serves your business, serves your personal peace of mind is extremely important when we decide how to approach anything, whether that's productivity, whether that's a business, whether that's content creation. These are important questions each of us have to ask ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to ask this to myself today. Okay, so मैम हम लोगों ने बहुत सारा discussion किया about productivity and everything. Now, it also, as you said, that you need to have 3 main tasks. So it is somewhere it also comes down to setting some kind of a routine. So, what are
Yes.
your thoughts on setting a routine? Is it important, or you can just go with the flow?
So, as a lifelong planner, I would 100% advocate routine. However, I don't advocate regimental routine. What I mean by regimental routine is don't create a routine for the sake of creating a routine. Don't do it because somebody told you you should create a routine. Create a routine because it helps you understand something as simple as showing up, even if you don't necessarily feel like doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
So, as an example, let us say you want to. So, I create on a schedule. I have a very clear schedule of content creation, content repurposing. So, I usually create a blog post once a week. I have a podcast episode once a week, a YouTube video once a week. And as an add on, I send a newsletter once a week. It's very clear, it's on my calendar. So, if I come to my creation, my work, my daily routine without a routine, if I do all of these things without a routine, I can be all over the place. So one of the reasons people face overwhelm is lack of routine.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have a routine, you are definitely likely to feel more overwhelmed. Routines are important because they help give even a loose structure to your day. Something as simple as, the minute you get up, you go brush your teeth. That's a routine. Whether we believe it or not, humans are creatures of habit.
Mm-hmm.
We are instinctively creatures of habit. But the only way the habit builds is if you actually incorporate it into your schedule. You can't say, okay, I'll brush my teeth whenever I feel like it,
Mm-hmm.
or if you say I'll go to bed whenever I feel like it, the problem with that approach is you will never be able to devote any energy or any attention to the things that truly matter. So, for every single person who has seen any kind of growth, personal, professional, or spiritual, you will notice all of them follow a routine. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
strict routine. It's not like you have to do, like some writers will say, I have to write 5,000 words every day. It doesn't have to be that way. But it would be something as simple as I show up every single day and write. Whether that's 50 words, 500 words, 5,000 words, 50,000 words is immaterial. But I show up every single day and write. Ask people who are into fitness, and they will not tell you things like, I magically got up one day and I was this much fitter or things like that. They just showed up every single day. And could be something as simple as I'll go for a 15-minute walk every single day. Or I'll do, 20 minutes of strength training every single day. Or I'll do 10 minutes of yoga every single day. But the more important thing is it's there in their routine.
Mm-hmm.
And for every single person who finds comfort in their productivity, it's because they stuck to a routine. But a
Mm-hmm.
routine which is aligning with their energy and their time. That's important.
ओके या दैट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कि अपनी एनर्जी अपने टाइम के हिसाब से आप अपना रूटीन सेट कीजिए और देयर हैज टू बी टाइम फॉर ब्रेक्स आल्सो लाइक यू टोल्ड कि
Absolutely.
यू टेक अ ब्रेक एवरी 12th वीक so like if for someone taking such a long break maybe may not be possible, so what do you recommend, like how important is taking a break, or is there a like a set ड्यूरेशन ऑफ अ ब्रेक कि इतना तो ब्रेक लेना ही लेना है, ऐसा कुछ है?
I would not say that there has to be a set duration. However, I do recommend that people try to incorporate at least 1 or 2 days off every 15 days if they can help it, or 1 day off every week. So give yourself that 1 day a week to completely unwind, to completely step back from all your, especially from if you're running a business, if you're running a
Mhm.
business or you have a workload of some sort. Because the problem is we can very easily fall into this trap of thinking that we are indispensable. Nobody is indispensable. Nobody is indispensable. This I've learned from experience. Even if, God forbid, one of us ends up in the hospital tomorrow, world will still go on. Yes, you are
Mhm.
in hospital. You are, seeking medical treatment for whatever it is you're seeking. But the world will go on. The world is resilient. And
Mhm.
your resilience will reflect in how well you are able to come back from breaks and embrace something again with a lot of comfort and energy. So that's
Mhm.
very important. I believe breaks are important. If you can incorporate even 1 day a week into your schedule, if 1 day is too much, 12 hours, switch off for 12 hours, or, just completely from all things business. Maybe Saturday evening to Sunday morning, you tell yourself, the world can wait while I spend this time for myself. But even for people who are building their business from scratch, who think that they have to spend 12 hours a day working and things like that, in my experience, I think you can easily do it with your regular 9 to 5 kind of work timings. You don't
Mhm.
need to be working 24/7. You don't need to be always on call, because you need time for yourself. Because if you don't make the time for yourself, productivity becomes practically impossible. It's useless.
Mhm. Yeah, now I'm seeing my patterns while talking to you. So like होता भी क्या है कि like when we are doing our business, there is a lot of things to do, plus what happens कि बहुत सारे offers अगर होते हैं तो we want to do it all, like we want to take it up all कि ये भी कर लें ये भी कर लें, because पता नहीं कल मिलेगा कि नहीं मिलेगा. So how do you
That is
decide what to take up and what to leave?
So that is called shiny object syndrome. And I've spoken about this as well. Shiny
Yeah.
object syndrome tells you, and that's basically building on what I call the scarcity mindset. Scarcity
Mm-hmm.
mindset says that if you don't do this now, you'll never be able to do this in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the wrong way to look at something, because I believe, more importantly, that if something is meant for you, it will find you. If something is meant to be in your life, it will manifest in your life once again. So we have to be comfortable with doing what I call the tough things, putting on blinders if required, like those horses, putting on blinders and focus on what matters to us right here, right now. Because growing, especially in your personal, professional, or spiritual journey, will not happen if you decide to keep getting sidetracked. As an
Mm.
example, I only blogged for 6 years. Only
Mm.
blogged. I didn't have any social media. I didn't have readers. I didn't have an audience. Kuch bhi nahi tha. So it was completely only the blog. So I completely worked only on the blog. 6 years later, I joined one social network, Facebook at the time. And then I joined one writing group. And I started blogging more consistently, but now this time with more feedback. Feedback
Mm.
where people were asking me things like, what kind of work do you do? What kind of writing do you do? And I was getting good editorial feedback from editors. Then a few years later, I decided to start a second blog. That was more, for my personal interest and things like that. After that, what happened a couple of years after that, I decided to explore the concept of Pinterest, which is again an SEO engine. It's like a visual search engine.
Mm.
Then about about 4 or 5 months after that, I got into my business. So people assume that everything has to happen right here, right now, at the same time.
Mm.
Growth doesn't happen that way. Growth is slow, growth is steady, and sustainable only when it happens over the long term.
Mm.
When people reach out to me and ask me, how soon can I make money from my website? I tell them I don't know. I have no idea because it all depends on A, how much time are you willing to put in? How focused are you willing to be? How much disappointment are you ready to take? Because this path is not easy.
Mm.
It's not easy. There will be days when you feel all energized and you want to only blog. There will be days when you don't want to look at your blog.
Mm.
So, are you willing to stick with your blog irrespective of all those emotions and all those feelings? So, in other
Mm.
words, are you willing to treat it the way you would treat a paying job, even if it doesn't mean you get paid?
Mm.
You understand what I
Yeah.
mean? Shiny object syndrome, for instance, like we spoke about this even before we started the session, right? About a year and a half ago, people started saying, start a podcast, we should start a podcast. At the time, I wasn't ready.
Mm.
When I was ready, which was earlier this year, I did all the research because by that time I had what I call systems in place. I
Mm.
already had a system of understanding, a routine. We'll go back to that now. Routine.
Mm.
You asked me about the value of routine.
Mm.
So when I put on my routine for the week and I know that I have to create one blog post a week, one video a week, one newsletter a week, and then I tell myself, okay, I have one day left when I can actually do something else. I know I can do one podcast episode a week.
Mm.
Then I can gently, bring myself into that space. But if I
Mm.
tell myself, no, I have to do podcast, I have to do YouTube, you understand the mindset over here. So if you already have a system in place, it's easier to start looking at new things.
Yeah.
So for a brand new blogger, as an example, I never tell them do blog and podcast simultaneously because as a new blogger, you would want to focus on improving your writing first and foremost. Then
Mm.
as you keep writing, your writing speed improves. So what would take you 2 hours to write initially, after 6 months will take you only 30 minutes to write. So you've automatically gained another 1.5 hours now. So that 1.5 hours you can now devote to creating a podcast episode. But you can only do that if you already have a routine and you already have a set rhythm, which you can gently modify to accommodate new things.
Mm.
And you should also be willing to let go of some things. So, for instance, Twitter is not serving me anymore. Get rid of Twitter. So I don't spend any more time on Twitter. So I'm gaining all that time back. So it's like checks and balances. So what do you take in? What do you take out? And it's an evolving process. You know,
Mm.
only start adding things when you have those spaces in your calendar. Don't do
Mm.
everything at once. That's my very firm advice.
Okay. And to tie everything together, I wanted to know your productivity tips. So initially, yes, you had mentioned your three things. Ki, decide this, but I'm sure ki you have more. So I would like to know. Yeah.
So if I had to give you a few tips regarding productivity, number one, I would say create your daily calendar based on your levels of energy. This is very important. How much energy you have through the day will determine how much time you can invest for different tasks. That's the first tip.
Mm.
The second tip I will give is to understand what is important and what is urgent. So it's called the Eisenhower matrix. So I won't go into those details right now. It's a little complicated, but I would encourage your listeners to go check it out. The Eisenhower matrix, which tells you what is important versus what is urgent, always helps when you're practically appreciating what you're trying to do. And number three, at the end of every day, write a done list. Forget your
Mm.
to do list, write a done list. Celebrate those little achievements. Celebrate the fact that you got to spend more time with your child today. Celebrate the fact that you cooked an amazing 3-course meal today. Celebrate the fact that you had an incredible client coaching session today. Because the more we celebrate those things, the more comfortable we are in embracing productivity as a daily part of our lives instead of something that we have to work towards consciously. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, it helps immensely. Okay, and ma'am, we would also like to know your favorite resources for productivity, maybe some books or some podcasts that you can recommend to the listeners.
So, in terms of books, I definitely recommend Atomic Habits. It's one of my favorite books on anything habit building, and it kind of segues into productivity as well. The other book that I would recommend is a book called Joyful Productivity by George Cow. I'll send you the links so that you could probably put it in the show notes.
Yes.
Um, Podcasts per se, I would say there's something called The Best of Both Worlds. It's
Mhm.
run by Laura Vanderkamp. She's again a very great advocate of gentle productivity. So I would encourage you to listen to that as well. So these are the 2 or 3 things that I would recommend for you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, ma'am. So now that you have shared so much of insights with us, we would also like to know how we can connect with you beyond this podcast.
Sure. So I'm available right now on Instagram as Shailaja V, LinkedIn, again, the same handle, Shailaja V. And of course, my website, which is shailajav.com. So that has all my links to my newsletter, my podcast, my content, all over the place. So yeah, I pretty much search for Shailaja V and you should be able to find anything at all about me.
Okay, wonderful. So do connect with Shalja ma'am on at Shaljavi on the platform she has mentioned. You can also check out her website. So, ma'am, it has been absolutely wonderful speaking to you. It has been 50 minutes of speaking to you. So it was really wonderful. Like I learned so much in today's episode, and I'm going to make notes immediately so that I don't forget. Thank you so much. Grateful to you.
Thank you so much for having me, Maitri. This was a very special honor and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
तो मैं भी अब प्रोडक्टिव होने वाली हूँ विद इमीडिएट इफेक्ट एंड आई एम श्योर कि आपने भी बहुत कुछ सीखा होगा. अब अच्छा लगा है तो फिर इस एपिसोड को 2 लोगों के साथ शेयर कर दो, या एक ही बंदे के साथ शेयर कर दो, या सोशल मीडिया पे शाउट आउट दे दो. यू कैन टैग मी एट लिटिल फिक्सेस पॉडकास्ट एंड एट शैलजा वी. लिटिल फिक्सेस को सब्सक्राइब, रेट एंड रिव्यू करना मत भूलना. लाइफ में मजे करो और सदा सैसी रहो. बाय.